everyone, and welcome to the thru Recovery Life Podcast. Today we have Miss Marie T, actually Marie B, in West Palm Beach, Florida, sharing her experience, strength, and hope with us, and here to tell us what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. So without further ado, I give you Miss Marie in West Palm Beach. All yours, Marie.
Thank you, John. Hi, everybody. I'm Marie, and I'm an alcoholic. I've been recovering now, it's 31 years, which is a miracle. And I'll start off with the fact that, like a lot of people, my father was an alcoholic. And Scranton, Pennsylvania has a lot of CIA, Catholic Irish alcoholics. And it was not unusual for people to have a father that was drunk, but they did not like it if you appeared too drunk in public. So what happened behind closed doors was fine. And also, I was a good Catholic girl, and I really believed in all those commandments, especially the one that said, honor your father and mother. My parents wanted me to stay home forever and just work and help them. I wanted to go to college, and they made it clear that wasn't going to happen. So again, in the 60s, the only other choice for me was to get married. And I did get married in 1968. I married an alcoholic, of course. I married my father, just a cuter version of him. That was hell. I really hadn't started drinking a lot. I didn't like alcohol. It was 7 and 7 the whole time, and he'd make fun of me, and I didn't care. So after a year of domestic abuse and cheating and his drinking and not keeping a job, I left him. And for the first time in my life, I was alone. And it was very scary for me. I rented a room in the Carter Apartments for women. And I was lonely. And I remember my first night there. It's like I was terrified. I had such panic. I couldn't take it. And I happened to be in the neighborhood of the local college, the University of Scranton. So, of course, that block had bars up and down. It was a big drinking area. And I went to the one bar called O'Toole's, and I had a drink. And, of course, guys hit on me and bought me more drinks. And I had more than my usual one. And I was able to go back to my room and go to sleep. I needed to find a job, and they offered me a job there as a waitress. So I took it. So that meant pretty much every night I was drinking, but I was making a living. So I was enjoying it. And we were going into the 70s. So most of you know what that was like. And if you're too young, you could read about it in my book. Yes, we'll talk about why that happened. So anyway, I then developed self-medicating, although I didn't know I was doing it at the time. That's what I was doing. I probably had PTSD between my father and my first husband because there was a lot of abuse, a lot of violence. And the alcohol just made me feel calm and happy. So I did that quite a bit. And then I got a job as a bartender. And I worked my way up from a little dive bar to a big, pretty popular, famous bar in Scranton called the Hotel Casey. And the Hotel Casey used to have all kinds of famous people and politicians come there. So I made tons of money in tips. And my drinking, it was just something you did. And bartenders drank on the job back then. So my habit was supported well. I also started to smoke pot. At that time, everybody I knew was smoking pot. So that became part of my lifestyle. By the time, I was still in my early 20s, but I had this desire to have children. And that was part of the reason that I got married the second time was I wanted to have children. And that I was selecting a husband from was not the best. And I ended up marrying this guy. He was like 6'4", 250 pounds. He was a bouncer at the bar across the street. And he just chased me and adored me. And, you know, he seemed like a big dummy, big lovable dummy. He didn't have a drinking problem. And so I just thought, oh, he's a safe bet. Boy, was I wrong. So we got married, and I had two girls and two children. He was a different type of addict. He was a gambling addict. So now I went to the point where there was no money. The early years when I was pregnant were young. I stopped drinking. I smoked pot, but I stopped drinking. Then when they were like 3 or 4, I had been enduring physical abuse, emotional abuse from this man for those few years, and about 6 years, I think. And I just couldn't take it anymore. So we went to marriage counseling, and the marriage counselor couldn't get him to participate. So he started seeing me alone, and he told me, you know, this is Catholic Social Services, and I'd get fired for telling you this. However, you're going nowhere. You're never going to reach your potential with this guy, and he is just no good. He said, I think you should leave him and go to college and make something of your life. Wow. Well, it took me another year before I did that, and I did that. And I enrolled in the University of Scranton. But first, I kicked my second husband out because he was never home, and he didn't bring any money. I was a college girl with 2 little kids, and I would take them to daycare in the morning. I'd go to school all day. I'd try to do studying before I got them. And then I would go and get them and take them home and give them a bath and put them to bed. And then I would study. And I had, at that time, which was mid-70s, I had a bong for really, I don't know how young wouldn't know what a bong is, but it's something you smoked pot in. And this bong, you usually put water in the bottom, but I like to put wine in the bottom. So I relaxed after and went to sleep. So I still, like, to me, it was very controlled because I'm raising 2 little kids. I'm going to college, and, you know, I'm doing that to relax. So finally, it got to the point where he still would not leave me alone, even though we were divorced. And he would just show up, and he would bully me and push me around and manhandle me. And it was getting really bad. So the one day, it was a Sunday, and I was at this big picnic. It was a political affair. And I ran into my first husband, and it had been 10 years. And the attraction was still there. And I was in such a sorry state. I started seeing him. And I knew he would stand up to Bob, my second husband. So I let him back in my life. Well, now I buy a bar. And that's when my drinking became a daily thing. And for some reason, I had a very high tolerance for alcohol, and I never had a DUI, and people never knew I was drunk. In fact, they would say, oh, let Marie drive. And I have just as much to drink as anybody else. So we had that bar, and it wasn't a good thing for the marriage because he was an alcoholic, and it just wasn't working. So I sold the bar, and with the money, I bought a mobile home. And I say because even when I was married or with these men, I'm the only one in the relationship that is making money and is responsible. So everything that happened because of what I did. But I was drinking, and I had gained a little weight, and I went to a doctor, and he gave me diet pills. Well, I'm a very hyper person, so at that time the diet pills were prevalent, and the doctors that were giving them out were making money, and they didn't care if you needed to lose weight or not. In fact, a couple of them ended up in jail. So this guy gave me a slew of different colored vitamin pills. I'll be all right. Diet pills. And oh my God, it was like such speed when I would take it. I'd say, oh, I can't take this. So I found out I could sell them. People would buy them off me. Well, that was a way to supplement my income at the time. So that's what I did. And long story short, the second time around with my first husband, it was even worse. And he still drank. He still fooled around. He still didn't make an income. And I put up with it for about 6 years. And I thought, what the hell? So finally I decided to care about myself more than him. I decided to love, and I put him out once and for all. And he could not get back in. Well, his pleading and crying and whatever. So now I'm finally single, and I can go out, and I'm not worried about anybody bothering me. And I start going out and drinking, and like I would have a babysitter for my kids, and I would go out with my girlfriends and go to all the discos and the bars, and I dated a lot of different types of men, and I was having a pretty good time. And my kids, they seemed happy. I made sure they went to dance lessons. They were cheerleaders. I was one of those functional alcoholics, I guess you'd call it. I got a great job working for a doctor. I went to further my education because I had only got 2 years of college at that time. And I went to a technical school to be a medical secretary, medical assistant, whatever. So I had that. And I won't tell you about all my conquests and situations, but I was that girl. I was that girl that would come in and the bartender knew that she was trouble. I would have guys fight over me and all kinds of stuff, and I liked it. I loved it. And my sister and I, we're 10 years apart. So at the time, now we're fast forwarding, what am I, 30? Yeah, I'm about 30. She's 20, I guess. And every once in a while, she'd say, oh, I don't feel good about myself. Let's go to Tony and Mary's. Tony and Mary's was this dive bar that the bottom dregs of society hung out in because the drinks were cheap. And the reason she'd want to go there is because we'd be the two best looking women in the bar. We wanted to boost up our self-esteem, so that's where we went. We did crazy things. So we get into the 80s, and again, I have freedom. I have a good job. My kids seem to be doing well, and I'm drinking. And I go to my 20th class reunion. And of course, I went alone. And my husband today, who I've been with for 34 years, believe it or not, he was there. And he was alone. So I said to him, oh, do you want to go for a drink after this? He said, yes, of course. So we went for a drink and breakfast. And then I hopped in my car and said goodbye, which I think he was disappointed. I think he thought there was going to be more than that. So when I met him for the second time, I didn't really know him when we were in high school. I had gotten rid of the husband. I was hanging out with a couple guys that were just drinking buddies. I was also dating a guy that was a confirmed bachelor, so I was going nowhere with him. And there was another guy that he was so good with my kids, and my kids loved him. And, I was with him just so, he'd buy my drinks. I was using men at this point because I felt I deserved to do that after all the crap I took from men before, starting with my father and onward. So I was growing weary and jaded, though. And Jerry wanted to go out with me. He was a teacher, and he had a side job as a bartender. And I would go in there and tell him my troubles. He was married. So I said no. I said, I'm not. I think he chased me for 3 months. And the one day I stopped in that bar on St. Patrick's Day, and he wasn't working that day. So he came in as a customer, and we drank together. And we ended up going out. So after that, I said to him, no, we can't do that. We can't do that again. We cannot end up doing anything physical like that. And he said, well, what if we just see each other platonically? Intimate relations, but we'll be friends, and we'll go out to dinner every week, every Friday. I said, all right, we'll try it. Well, that didn't work too long. And the next thing you know, we were intimate and we fell in love. And I broke up with him after I fell in love with him, because I said to him, I'm not going to be anybody's mistress, so I have to break this off. And I was serious. There's no way. There's no way. And the next morning, he called me and asked me if we could meet for breakfast at a diner by my trailer park. And I said, okay. And I met him for breakfast. Now, Jerry, of course, was an alcoholic. It seems to be that's what I was attracted to, addicts. And I went. I thought, well, he needs closure. And I drove into the parking lot, and he got out of his car, came up to me and said, will you marry me? And I was stunned. And I said, well, you'd have to get divorced first, which he did. He decided he was so in love with me, and he was not in love with his wife, unfortunately, after so many years. He had also done what I did. He got married because it was time to get married, and it was time to have children. That's what you did in the 60s, and that's what he did. So we got married. And of course, we bought a bar, because to me, I knew that these men loved having the bar in this way. We would live upstairs, and he could drink all he wanted, and I wouldn't have to worry about him driving. Now, you see, the focus is not on my drinking still. It's on my partner's drinking. So we did that. We had the bar for a few years, and that's what we did. I would work days, he would work nights. We just had to go upstairs. It was an apartment building now that we owned also. And it worked, but he was such a drunk. He was the one that would fall asleep at the bar. He was noticeable. People knew he had a problem. Now I have this car accident. Well, it was during the day. I hadn't had a drink yet, but that doesn't mean I wasn't toxic. I had a car accident, and I ended up going to a doctor who prescribed muscle relaxers and pain pills. And on the bottle, it said, do not take with alcohol. Well, there's a chapter in the big book that says, if you don't think you're an alcoholic, try some controlled drinking. Well, I did that before I even got sober, because I decided I could have one drink. So I told my bartender, look, I'm on these pain medications and everything. I'm just going to come down at night and have one drink, but make it a good one, nice big Manhattan for me. Okay. So I would come down, and I would get my nice big Manhattan, and talking to everybody. You could tell I'm a talker. And the next thing you know, my glass would be empty, and I would push it forward, which is the sign for a bartender to fill it. Well, he would come over and whisper to me, and he'd say, you told me just one. So I know what I told you, but, fill the glass. So I would end up having a second one. And after that, I was in a blackout. I had never had a blackout in my drinking experience in my history, because I wasn't taking pills with it. Now that I'm on these pain and muscle relaxers and disregarding the instructions, I'm having blackouts. blackouts, and I did not like having blackouts. I needed to be in control. That was part of my character defect, and I needed to be in control. I did not like the next day when people would tell me stories about what I did, and I did not remember doing it. I just hated that. So this continued for a while, and it was around Mother's Day, and I was to the point where I would wake up in the morning and I wouldn't want to die, but I wouldn't want to live. It's like I didn't want to spend another day. I was in a very low bottom of spiritual desert, like being in a desert, a spiritual desert. And so we had a very good customer who was a chiropractor, Dr. Bob. And he did drugs and he drank, and everybody loved him. He had a wonderful personality. And every once in a while, he would go away because it got out of control. So I said, I want to go to that place that Bob goes to, which I did not know was a treatment facility. I thought it was a spa. So they're all everyone's all thrilled. My kids are thrilled. Everybody's thrilled. They pack me up and off I go to Margaret, which is a very, very nice, very good treatment center. It's still in business now. It's actually had movie stars there. I've met people up there. It's very good. So my insurance was good. I was able to go there. I got there, and they took my bathing suit and my magazines, and they said, "You're not going to need those." So I really didn't understand. Well, the first 5 days I was there, they had to medically detox me. If they didn't, I could have died. So they gave me Librium, and the other people there, they would call it the Librium shuffle. She's doing the Librium shuffle because you're so medicated that you're really fuzzy, but they needed to do that. And then after they got me to my levels of being okay, they took me off that. So Jerry came up to visit me then. I wasn't allowed to see anybody before that. And he came up to see me, and we went for a walk, and he said to me, I have a big announcement. He said, I decided I'm going to stop drinking for you. I said, oh, really? I said, well, that's nice, but I think you need to sell the bar. Well, he didn't like that. So I spent 28 days at this institution, and I went home, and Jerry tried to keep the bar for a while, but it just wouldn't work because we just couldn't trust anybody to run it. It became a nightmare. So we ended up getting rid of that after a year or two. And also, I had a habit of I wasn't supposed to go in the bar, but I'd see somebody's car, and I'd decide to poke my head in, and I'd end up talking about getting sober. And he'd kick me out, and he'd say, you're bad for business, get out. So after a while, we did get rid of that. That was it. And about 5 years sober, I got a sponsor right away. I went to a meeting every day, sometimes twice a day. I worked the steps. I did service. I did absolutely every single thing they told me to do. But I still had this hole, and I still felt empty. And about 5 years sober, I had gained 50 pounds of weight. Oh, no, wait, stop and correct that. 1 year sober, 50 pounds. And I knew I had substituted a food addiction. So I went to this place in California for 3 weeks that dealt with that. And my husband was like, oh, God, are you going to be going away every year? I said, I'm going away as much as I have to. I want to stay sober. I came back, and I was doing therapy nonstop for 9 years. I did therapy. I did group therapy. I did individual therapy. I did whatever I had to do to stay sober. I went to meetings. I sponsored many, many women in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and in Florida. But in Scranton, I had a big group of women that I sponsored. They just had to come to my house. I'd have like 10, and they would have homework to do. It was like school. So I really loved that. Then about 5 years sober, I went into a deep depression, And I went to the Karen Foundation, and they had like a 5-day program for family of origin issues. And they worked on that, which I guess I really needed to. A lot of rage and anger came out while I was there that I had been pushing down, you know. So that really helped. We moved to Florida when Jerry retired. That's 18 years ago. And I was going to meetings and I was sponsoring women and everything was okie dokie and good. And then we got 2020. Also, in 2015, I had a very serious stomach infection and they had to take 85% of my stomach out. Then in the following year, I got breast cancer and had a double mastectomy. Had a lot of problems, a lot of surgeries, infections and stuff. Survived all that, didn't drink. My husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's after we moved to Florida. And 2020, it just so happens he was entering stage 3. So he still could do everything, but there were a lot of things that were not good for him to do. He fell quite a bit. His balance was off. So I was doing that. And you know what? 2020 was tough because we had to isolate. I also have an autoimmune disease. So we couldn't go to meetings in person. And thank God for Zoom because we found Zoom meetings. And we started going to the Zoom meetings, which really, really, really helped. But you know what? My depression was back. And the reason I knew was I had started to get very mean to my husband. I could see the impatience and resentment coming out and nasty remarks. And my doctor said, I'm going to hook you up with a psychiatrist and a therapist. I said, okay. And it turns out, I had been put on an antidepressant when I got sober because they told me I suffered from panic disorder and chronic depression. Well, I had been taking the same antidepressant for 30 years. And the psychiatrist said, it doesn't work anymore. It's been 30 years. Your body has gotten used to it. So she put me on a new prescription. And I started seeing the physical therapist every week in the beginning. And within a couple of weeks, I was so much better. Now, my therapist, I had told her that my biggest thing was at 4:00 every day, my husband would shut down like a computer. And I hated that. I couldn't have a conversation with him or anything. We're both sober, but we're both still going to have problems and we're getting older, And she said to me, you look pretty interested in life from what you're telling me. Why don't you write a book? I said, no, I don't know. She said, well, when he shuts down every day, you go in and you write for an hour. Well, I ended up writing a chapter a night and found out how to self-publish, and I published it on Amazon and Audible. And it's given me a new interest. It's giving me something to look forward to every day, which I need. You can be sober, you could be going to meetings, you could be doing all the AA things you should be doing, but you need a passion, you need something. And in writing that book and finding out that I could write and that people wanted to read it, it just gave me that boost that I needed. So some days are not good, some days are terrible, but most days I get up and I say, what are we going to do today? Do it with a smile. I live in a beautiful place filled with water and trees and animals. And the speaker before me actually is my sponsee. And she is one of the most lovely. And that's what AA gives you. It gives you these people that you might never meet otherwise. I would have never been in her life. She would have never been in mine. So it's a blessing to be sober today. And I hope somebody got something out of what I said. And John, that's all I have for you today.
Right, fantastic. Thank you, Marie. And if you could text me a link to your book, I will put that in the description so that when people click on the podcast, if they would
I'll
like to
tell you
see
right
it.
now,
Say that again.
it's called Raised by Wolves, Trapped by Demons, and it's not under my normal name. It's under another name. So yes, I will text that to you. And I would love if the people that see that, if they go on Amazon and just they can read the first 3 chapters for free, I think that they will relate. And that book is meant to show that you can come out of the deepest darkness into the light. And that's it. All right, hon.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Marie. You enjoy the rest of your day.
Oh yeah, thank you for allowing me to be here. I enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you.